Hey folks, this is Buddy Holmes, Waterfall Forge. I've been a copper artisan, I guess they call us copper artisans, for something like 28 years now. And what we do is we do more natural forms. We don't do traditional copper work. We do things like leaves and flowers and birds and little animals and things like that. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do some instructional videos. I've been asked for years to do this, and I've just now kind of got around to it. We're going to start off really simple. If you don't have a lot of tools, don't worry about it. We're going to start off and show you the kind of things that you can do with some very simple tools. And if you've got a fully equipped shop and lots of tools, well then that's great. That's going to make it much easier for you. But we're going to start out and do some things that even if you don't have practically nothing as far as the tools go, that you'll still be able to do some good work. We're going to try to do these, or at least this is the plan, is we're going to try to do one of these about once every week or so. And probably in about a month and a half or 2 months, we'll have enough of these under the belt that we can actually put that stuff together that we've been talking about and actually put it together into some kind of little project. I'm not sure what that's going to be yet, but I'll come up with something. And then you'll actually have a thing that you can put on the shelf or give to your wife or give to your boyfriend or give to your mother or something like that. But we're going to be doing these, like I said, we're going to try to do one of these about once every week or so. So hang in there with us, join us if you can, let people know about it if you know somebody who's interested in doing this kind of thing. And I'll see you in about a week after this one, but hang into this one because this is the lead in to the very first one related to leaf forms. So we'll play around with that some, and I'll see you in about a week. Thanks. We're going to start doing some leaves now, and we're going to go over to the work table, show you how to use some templates, what kind of different materials you can use for templates, patterns, how to cut them out, or how we cut them out at least. And then from then we'll move over to the stump and we'll talk about hammering and putting in veins and things of that nature. Okay, let's get started. Okay folks, look, there's any number of ways to cut patterns out. This is my layout table. We do most of our work right here. I'm hoping I'm framed up right. I'm doing this by myself. We make patterns out of all sorts of different things. A lot of my patterns are made out of just heavy copper, like 32-ounce copper. And the reason is it doesn't have to be that. It's just that it's got a thicker edge, easier to draw around. They don't bend easily, so they stick around with me for years. But you can make them out of anything. I've got a lot of patterns that we use that are just made out of just regular galvanized metal. I even had some stainless steel laying around and made a couple out of that. And there's a material that you can get, like at Lowe's or Home Depot. It comes in 4x8 sheets, and it's just kind of a plastic material. And I use it for bigger patterns. It's actually pretty substantial, lasts quite a while, and is real easy. And plus, it's 4x8 sheet. You can cut an awful lot of patterns out of that. And we have some, you know, that we make out of just plain wood for a lot of our circles and things. And we've got a few other things made this way. But look, what we're going to do now is we're going to do a simple leaf, and I'm not going to even use a pattern to do it. I'm just going to draw it out. And we're going to start out with something, you know, fairly simple. It doesn't really matter if it's something that we'd actually use later on. I'm just showing this to you as a demonstration piece. So we're going to do this a heart-shaped leaf. Now there's all sorts of ways to cut it out. This, by the way, is 20-ounce copper. So it's a little bit heavier than roofing copper, which most people will start with. I've always used 20 and 24 ounce for my standard models that I do, my usual work. And these are just regular aviation shears. And I'm just going to go around and cut this out of the major sheet and come around and try to be as neat as possible. Now, if you haven't used aviation shears before, they're not hard to do. It's just it takes a little practice so that you get it where you don't have a lot of burrs, because you know, that's kind of an aggravation. Now, something that we learned a long time ago is these happen to be the kind, the red ones, that turn to the left. But if you want to cut to the right, all you have to do is flip them upside down, and that works really quite well. And they're made for doing curves, so they're actually a little bit easier to use than the ones that are the straight type that you actually have to kind of force into a curve. Now these particular ones are easier to cut when you cut to the left, but if you need to cut to the right, a curve, just flip them upside down. And it takes a little bit of practice to do that, but not much. Now when we're doing bigger pieces, long cuts, and actually sometimes some of our smaller leaves that have easy curves to them, This is a Bosch Unishear. Makita makes one too. You can actually get a get an inexpensive version of this at Harbor Freight for about $40, $50. These run around $300, and so does the Makita. They cut tighter curves, but you can cut up to about 16 gauge steel with this, but we only use it for copper. But just to show you how this works. It's pretty quick, and it really saves your hand, because otherwise you're going to be doing a lot of cutting like this with the aviation shears, and after a while that gets tiresome when you're cutting a lot. But anyway, now we're going to move over and I'm going to show you another little gadget that's helpful for cutting things. Hey folks, this is a little nibbler, and these are available on eBay or Amazon. You get them between about $40 and $100 depending on the brand. These are a little different than the handheld type nibblers that you might be used to. Those are a little bit larger, the cutter's larger, and you get more of an excess dropping out of them when you do it. These are a little bit smaller, a little more refined cutter, so you get actually a pretty nice edge, and it's great for doing little sharp turns when you have some work to do like that. And I've got mine hooked up to an electric foot pedal, and I got it on my drill and a little vise hooked up to it just for being handy. And you start this thing off, and you can do all kind of neat little cuts with it, and we don't use it a lot, but every once in a while we'll end up with a shape, a leaf or something that's a little bit more intricate, and this is a lot easier than trying to work in and out with the aviation shears or some smaller snips. But just an extra little tool, but you don't have to have them at all. It's just one of those handy things. Okay, here's where we are so far. We've got the heart-shaped little kind of leaf shape that we cut out a few minutes ago, and I cut another one out while you guys weren't watching, so that we can do a difference between hammering the veins in it unannealed and annealed. I guess unannealed is a good word, but we're going to anneal this one now. Now I use oxygen propane, but you can use oxygen acetylene, or you can have just a plain propane torch with a little pin type end on it to do this kind of work, but it's not as easy. It's just much easier with oxygen propane or oxygen acetylene. But I'm going to just go ahead and anneal this. And annealing it is heating it up to a point where the copper will get soft. And it's just easier to hammer. And I like the look of it better when you hammer it, because the veins that you put in it are a little softer and more natural looking than if you hammer it cold without having been annealed at all. Those veins tend to be a little bit, or those lines tend to be a little bit sharper, more mechanical looking, more manufactured looking, whereas the annealed ones, aside from it being easier to do, also gives you, just kind of a nice softer look. Now what I've done right now, and I'm just kind of spending more time than I normally would on this just to show you, but you bring it up to where it's kind of an orange or reddish color. Now there's several different types of annealing. I'm going to turn this torch off. One is you can just anneal it till it loses all of its brightness. It gets kind of a blackish gray color. And then if you want to continue, and you might have some heavier copper, or you're going to work on it for a good bit and you're going to hammer it a lot, then the thing to do then is to get it up to kind of a red color and hold it there with your torch so that it stays red for maybe 4 or 5 seconds. And then what you're going to have when you're done with it is what's called dead soft, which is just considerably softer annealing. Okay, now we're going to go over to the stump and hammer some veins. Hey guys and gals, we're back. This is my new stump. We flooded over here in my area last year, and I lost my 2 really good stumps I'd had forever. And so I found a replacement. It's not quite up to par yet, and it's got some cracks and things, but it's the best I could find at the time. But I made a little dish in here and a couple little notches here and there for things that we do pretty frequently. But it's workable, it's serviceable till I find something a little bit better. These are 2 leaf shapes that we cut out. There's a little heart shape that we annealed a few minutes ago, and this is the one that we left unannealed. Now, as far as hammers and chisels, most people start off with little ball peen hammers like this one, or a larger version of this would be fine. And that'll work fine. A lot of people use that their whole careers and do nothing any different than that. I have a rounding hammer here that I've had for probably 10 or 15 years. This one, a friend of mine made just recently for heavier stuff. Plus, I just kind of like to use it. It gives me a sense of power. And the chisels themselves, when you're starting out, I mean, I've had these for a long time, and these are nothing but masonry chisels that you can get at just a hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, something like that. Now, when you get these chisels to begin with, they're kind of straight and they're fairly sharp. So you want to sand them a little bit smooth. You want to buff that edge off because otherwise it'll just cut right through the copper. And on the ends, they tend to come straight out. You want to kind of round that because of the same reason. When you chisel it, if you hit it hard, it's going to just cut a hole right there. So you kind of round them off a little bit, and that makes it a little bit more usable. You see I did that same thing with this. This one's kind of straight, but it's still rounded off on the edges. This little one I've had for a long, long time because originally the stem on it was about this long. And I've hammered it down and then ground it off and hammered it down and ground it off until now it's about like this. But any number of little sizes like this, you can find ones that are a little bit smaller depending on the size of your work. Round them off, that a little bit shorter, but this way. And you can do it, you're hammering just strictly on some wood. And it doesn't have to be a stump. You can just get you a couple pieces of plywood, stack them up, screw them together, put a vise on them to keep them from bouncing around on you. And that'll work fine for a long time. But what we'll do right now is I'm going to put a little vane in this. I'm just going to use this little small one. And we'll use this little rounding hammer here that I've had for a long time. Now all I'm going to do is just lightly hit it because I just kind of want to establish where the line's going to be. And then I can come back and hit it a little harder and get a nice line on it. Now, I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is what I was talking about earlier. See, that line is very, very sharp. And it's a lot sharper than I would think I'd see something in nature. It's just too nice. And I think it really needs to be a little bit rounder and softer. So what I generally do, as I mentioned earlier, is I will anneal it and I will use the chisel on it, and I'll get a softer look to it. Now, aside from the wood, if you have a gasket company near you, or you can probably get these off of eBay, this is neoprene. Now, this is, I think, probably a little more than an eighth. It might be like, 3/16 or something like that. And these I use because it helps break up this hard line. It kind of goes in a little bit, gives you a little bit of definition as far as this roundness and everything that I'm talking about, which is just that's a personal preference for me. Plus, when you get into texturing things later and you want to put a little bit of a dish in it, a little roundness to it, this neoprene gives enough that if you had your little round hammer like this, you can hammer in the back of it and get a nice little dishing into it that's much harder to do on just solid wood like this. Plus, you can get the neoprene in different thicknesses. This is a thin one that I have, and this one's a little bit thicker. So you can use these. Now this, remember, hasn't been annealed, but if you hammer it, I'm just going to go ahead and do this right now with this little ball peen. You can hammer it and get, and I don't know, I'm not too good with the camera yet, so you're probably not going to be able to see this well, so you're going to have to take my word for it. That you get a roundness right here. It dips in, and that's all because it's sinking into this neoprene, and you can get some pretty neat effects with this. Much easier than trying to find something round to get underneath there. You can just use the neoprene as a cushion for doing this. But in any event, nice sharp line if you want it that way, unannealed, and it works fine like that. A lot of people work that way and don't anneal their leaves, but I just tend to like to do it when they're annealed, because you get that softer look. Now I'm going to do the same thing I just did a second ago. I'm going to make another one. I'm going to use a different chisel, and it really doesn't matter. It's just to show you a variety. And I'm going to, this is a rounding hammer, so it means one side's flat, one side's round. And whenever you're doing chisel work, you always want to use the round side because you have a better contact area. And just whack it good. Get rid of a little bit of stress. So I'm going to go ahead and put some veins in this thing. We're just going to make a little simple vein structure. work our way down. And we're just going to put 3 in there. So nothing much to it. Whack it good. And boy, I feel so much better now already. And let's see if we can get I'm going to try to show you, but you see this with it landing on this neoprene. I don't know if you can see how it's sunk in right here. And this is an effect that you really won't get so much when you're hammering it on wood because it's just the wood's so hard. It's just an effect I prefer. Now, this is not how we would normally leave our leaves. I mean, eventually we're going to put a stem on it, of course, but we don't want to leave them flat. We want to put some kind of shape into them. And you can do that with your fingers. You can do it with a hammer. You can do it with a soft hammer. You can do it with a rubber hammer. And I'll show you in the next video how we can curve it and actually put kind of a curve into the leaf this way, really easy without crimping it up. But that's all we're going to do for now. And then I'm going to show you a little bit more detail about texturing things and how to do forms and things like that. We'll get into doing branches, and then we'll do some flower parts and put some flowers together and so forth. So in the event, this will end this one up. So y'all have a good one, and I'll see you hopefully within the next week or so with a new one. Thanks.